The machines didn't fear much until they met something that didn't recognize limits. The training hall smelled of ozone and oil, echoing with the hum of precision-made endurance drones. They were built to measure every heartbeat, every strain, every failure. Then a human walked in, barefoot on cold metal, and smiled like the word "times break times" was a personal challenge. Dozens of cadets, cybernetic, scaled, plated, augmented, turned toward him, their exoskeletons whirring with quiet efficiency. They scanned him automatically, finding nothing special, no implants, no performance regulators, no neural sync, just organic mass and stubborn anatomy. The instructor, a towering hybrid of steel and sinew named Vark Thul, watched in amusement. "Primitive," he muttered. "Let's see how long it lasts." His voice boomed through the hall. "Train until you break." The cadets roared in response, activating endurance rigs, grav weights, and combat simulators. The human just nodded once, rolled his shoulders, and began to move. His name was Jack Ellis. His file was unimpressive by galactic standards, combat trained, yes, but unaugmented, with zero cybernetic enhancement. A relic, some whispered. A baseline. He was only here as part of an interspecies exchange program, a diplomatic token. His odds of surviving one full cycle in the academy? Less than 4%, according to initial probability projections. But Jack wasn't here to meet expectations. The first sequence was the warm-up, 10 minutes of kinetic activation under standard gravity. Most cadets moved in tight mechanical sync, their limbs guided by neural implants that mapped each movement to efficiency profiles. Jack moved differently, more fluid, less precise. He looked out of place at first. He even lagged, shoulders rising and falling as his chest worked for breath. No coolant gel pumped through his skin, no micro shocks to optimize his heart rate. Already at max exertion, one of the reptilian cadets muttered, eyeing him sideways. Jack heard it. He didn't answer. When the instructor called for gravity increase, most adjusted without complaint. The academy floor cycled to 1, 5G, then 2G, then 3G over the next 20 minutes. Cadets compensated automatically bone reinforcement, muscle tension recalibrations, synthetic lubricants flushed through artificial joints. Jack simply leaned forward, eyes fixed, sweat glistening off his back like condensation on glass. His jaw clenched. His pace held. At 3G, even the most heavily modified began to show strain. Overclock servos hissed. Hydraulic limbs shuddered slightly with each lift. Internal diagnostics chimed, soft alerts, temperature spikes, coolant loss, cardiovascular anomalies. Jack's footfalls remained steady, slower than before, yes. He was drenched. His muscles trembled now, his breath loud and wet. But he moved. No alarm, no collapse. Vark Thul approached the edge of the training platform, narrowing his eyes at the human's readout. "Override the monitor," he said. "Give me raw vitals." The central screen displayed a dizzying array of data. Heart rate elevated but consistent, blood pressure high but not critical, core temperature rising at a realistic pace but no signs of failure. Vark Thul squinted at the cortisol levels. Elevated, yes, but within tolerable range. "He should have reached system collapse at minute 40, a technician muttered. "He's nearly at 90. Jack blinked. Just once. No grin now, no swagger. He was pale, maybe even lightheaded, but still moving. When the warm-up ended at the 2-hour mark, 2 cadets had already dropped out. Their mechanical limbs had locked up to prevent structural damage. Autopods rolled in to escort them to medical. One drone wheeled over to Jack, scanning his legs and abdomen. "Muscle tearing in quadriceps," it chirped. "Recommend cessation of activity." Jack didn't respond. He was busy unwrapping the sweat-drenched band around his forehead, shaking out his hair, and nodding silently at the instructor. Vark Thul narrowed his eyes. "Initiate stage 2. The walls opened with a hiss. Shock feedback drones buzzed to life, forming a synchronized grid around the training field. The rules changed now. Every delayed movement triggered a calibrated jolt, enough to simulate real-time combat fatigue. The goal was to force failure by stress layering, physical, mental, and neurological overload. Cadets readied themselves. Shock suppression fields lit up on their suits. The next phase was designed to last 1 hour, Most never made it that long. The drones began. Cadets dodged, dipped, rolled through the randomized stings. Their augmented bodies absorbed and redistributed the electric shocks. Cooling filaments glowed faint blue under their armor. Their steps were measured, rehearsed. Jack didn't have armor. He had skin. The first hit caught him square in the side, making his torso convulse. He grunted, stumbled, recovered. Then another. His arms twitched as he adjusted to the pattern. The pain showed his movements stiffened slightly, shoulders tightening. But he adapted. He kept going. Every 5 minutes, a new wave launched, randomized from 32 possible trajectories. Jack got hit more often than the others. No protection meant no buffer. His skin began to welt, bright red marks rising along his sides and back. Still, he moved. By the 90-minute mark, another 3 cadets had dropped. 2 more disengaged voluntarily, their neural sinks warning of stress cascade. Only 9 remained. Jack was one of them. Is he chemically suppressing pain? A technician asked. No, the AI paused, recalculating. Pain response, active. He just isn't stopping. Vark Thul scowled. Foolish, he'll tear his body apart. Yet, when the instructor looked closer, he saw something terrifying. Jack Times was times breaking, just not catastrophically, not instantly. His movements had grown uglier, less controlled. He was compensating manually, pushing through joint strain by bracing with alternate muscle groups. A fully organic system slowly reshuffling itself to keep going. The drones noticed too. They began to overcorrect, tracking Jack more often, trying to resync their calibration patterns to match a target that refused to conform. But that made them inefficient. Several missed their charges. One drone whirled off center and slammed into a wall, its gyro overheated. Another sparked midair and dropped. A soft warning blinked across the instructor's terminal. Drone cohesion compromised. Cooling threshold approaching. Jack didn't notice. He was in some kind of controlled trance now, breath ragged, legs wobbling, eyes slightly unfocused. Time? Vark Thul asked. 4 hours, 23 minutes since start, the AI replied. Shut it down. The command was relayed. The drones powered off. Cadets collapsed to one knee, panting or groaning. Autopods flooded the room, scanning joints, injecting stabilizers, realigning misaligned servos. Jack stood in the center, swaying slightly. He didn't fall. Vark Thul stepped forward. You heard the signal, it's over. Jack looked up, blinking sweat from his eyes. His voice came low, hoarse. You said until we break. You're injured. Jack gave a nod so small it was barely visible. Pulled something, left calf, might be tearing. You continued. I didn't stop. He drew a shaking breath. You didn't say stop. Vark Thul stared at him for several seconds. Then he gestured to the med drone. Scan him. The unit hovered forward and lit Jack's frame in a pale beam. Its voice was clipped. Multiple soft tissue injuries, calf strain, minor ligament overstress in right shoulder, 3 cracked ribs, fluid loss at 18%, core temperature rising. Recommend immediate medical intervention and forced rehydration. Any structural collapse? Negative. Jack reached down, picked up his towel, and draped it across his shoulders. He looked at the instructor and gave a quiet nod, half respectful, half exhausted. I'll be in the infirmary. He walked out without waiting for clearance. The room was silent. One cadet, still kneeling, looked up at Vark Thul. He's just flesh. No, Vark Thul muttered, eyes still on the door. He's something else. He didn't beat the program. He times ignored times it. And somewhere deep in the processing hub, one line of code updated itself in the Endurance AI. Human subject, anomalous. Operational limit, unknown. Jack didn't remember much about getting to the infirmary. The med drone hovered beside him the entire way, constantly repeating hydration prompts, while a coolant patch inflated over his shoulder. By the time the doors hissed open, his vision had narrowed to a tunnel, his legs moving more from habit than conscious choice. He collapsed onto the exam table, just as the nurse bot rolled over and connected the intravenous line. Estimated water loss, 2.8 liters, it said in a neutral tone. Blood sodium elevated. Muscle degradation detected in multiple regions. You require rest. Jack didn't argue. He lay back as saline flooded his veins, the cold sting in his arm both painful and comforting. 3 hours passed in the medical bay before the Academy's attending physician, a 6-armed species known for their surgical precision, entered, scanning Jack's file with one eye, while another probed the scans. "You're very lucky," it said in a tone that tried and failed to sound clinical. 3 cracked ribs, not displaced, 2 strained ligaments. Your calf will require at least 10 rotations to heal, minimum. You're grounded from physical training for a week. That's non-negotiable. Jack exhaled. Wasn't negotiating? The physician squinted. "Why didn't you stop?" Jack turned his head slowly. He said, "Until we break. Not until we tweak a knee, or until you feel like quitting. Where I'm from, that phrase means something." "You tore 3 ribs." "Cracked," Jack corrected. "If they'd been broken, I would have stopped." The physician clicked the scanner shut and shook its head. "Humans. You all came with the same bones, same cardiovascular limiters, same flawed biology, but no 2 of you break the same way." It wasn't praise. It was a warning, and Jack understood it. He slept for the rest of that rotation, muscles twitching involuntarily in his sleep as his body tried to repair itself. The medical AI administered anti-inflammatories, minor muscle regeneration boosters, and regulated sleep cycles. When he woke, it was not to breakfast or daylight but to a message blinking on the sidewall. Instructor Varkthul has scheduled a debriefing. Attendance required. No physical participation expected. Jack dressed slowly. The rib compression wrap tightened with each breath. His calf throbbed, not enough to stop him from walking, but enough to remind him that his body had limits, and they were now bruised and ringing like cracked glass. The debrief room was smaller than the training hall, quiet and dimly lit. Varkthul stood at the far end, flanked by a half-sphere display of holographic footage. Dozens of metrics hovered mid-air: performance charts, drone logs, overheating events. Jack entered, limping slightly. He didn't try to hide it. "You should still be lying down," Varkthul said without looking. "Wanted to hear it myself." Varkthul gestured at the display. "These numbers don't make sense. You outlasted 6 augmented species. You wore out my equipment. I've been running this program for 16 cycles. No one has ever caused a machine to shut down due to its own overheating." Jack tilted his head. "You ran the drills too hot. Machines weren't built to handle a human who doesn't peak in 45 minutes. Varkthul turned. "No, they were built to identify failure points and force adaptation. But you never failed. You adapted in real time, even as your body degraded. Do you know what that means?" Jack swallowed. His ribs still hurt when he breathed deeply. "I kept going, that's all." "No, it means we failed. Not you. We failed to design a system that understands what you are. The machines don't know how to respond to a subject who doesn't conform." Jack scratched the back of his head. "I'm not special. I just trained old school." "Define that." Jack sat down carefully. Earth's early military training didn't rely on neural regulators or biomech feedback. You ran until your legs gave out. You pushed through cramps. We taught ourselves how to recognize real pain, not just flagged signals. We learned the difference between discomfort and danger. Varkthul studied him. "You've blurred the line." "Maybe, but I knew when to stop." "You stopped after machines collapsed." Jack offered a lopsided smile. "They didn't say, 'train until they break.'" There was silence for a long moment. Then Varkthul turned to the display. "We've sealed the endurance hall for recalibration. You caused a drone feedback loop that triggered 5 cooling failures. 1 unit ignited internally. It melted its own servos, trying to predict your rhythm." "Sorry." "I'm not angry. I'm recalculating. This academy was designed to test every known species against the highest standards. Yours are unknown." Jack stood again, slower this time. "I'm not a benchmark. I've got torn muscle and cracked ribs to prove it." "But your mind didn't quit," Varkthul said. "That's what terrifies the others. They can accept physical endurance, but not mental compliance with suffering." Jack didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded once. Varkthul watched him for a moment longer. "Rest. We'll resume training in 1 week. No combat trials until you pass a full diagnostic. Jack hesitated. You're still letting me continue? Vark Thul's face didn't shift, but something in his posture did. I'm not letting you, I'm watching you. Closely. Jack left without another word. By the next day, the rumors had spread. Cadets whispered in the mess hall, in the gym, in the corridors that connected dorm sectors. The human didn't stop. The machines failed before he did. Some joked he was part synthetic. Others claimed Earth had trained him in gravity pits, using pain as feedback. One lizard-like cadet asked if his bones were made of reinforced carbon. Jack ignored all of them. He spent the week on rehab. No shortcuts, no tech. He wrapped ice around his calf and elevated it at night. The medbay gave him manual resistance bands and a range of motion chart printed on thin composite paper, exactly how he'd requested it. Primitive, one nurse commented. Effective, Jack replied. The ribs took longer. Each day, he breathed a little deeper. By the 4th day, he could jog lightly on a treadmill under 1 G. No sprints, no jumping, just repetition. On the 7th day, the physician gave him clearance conditional. He was to return to training under observation only. No contact drills, no high G sessions. If his biometrics flagged strain, he was to stop immediately. That day, Jack stepped back into the endurance hall. It had been rebuilt, reinforced. The drones now had redundant cooling nodes. The floor plating had been upgraded to support 7 Gs without warping. And the AI had a new subroutine, human mode. It simply meant variable timing, randomized stress intervals, and a fail-safe not for the trainee, but for the equipment. Vark Thul watched from above. The command wasn't shouted this time. No ceremony, just a signal from the tower. Begin training cycle 02. Sub-threshold protocols. Jack stepped into the ring. The others joined, their expressions guarded. The mockery was gone. Even the disbelief had faded. What remained was something else, curiosity, maybe, or apprehension. The human didn't look like much, not with tape around his ribs and a compression sleeve on one leg. But as the cycle began and the machines hummed to life again, there was a moment tiny, almost invisible, where the drones hesitated, just half a second, as if remembering. Jack moved. Nothing showy, just steady. The machines watched him closely. And somewhere, deep within the new algorithm, one line flashed. Human mode active. Monitoring equipment, not subject. 3 rotations passed. Jack's calf still ached when he pivoted too fast, and he had to sleep on his back to avoid pressing into his ribs. But he moved like someone who had already decided the pain wasn't going to decide anything for him. The academy adapted. A new instructor protocol was issued quietly to all departments, reclassifying human endurance training under variable decay assessment, a euphemism for times we don't know when they'll stop. So monitor everything else asterisk. The AI was ordered to track environmental strain before physiological strain. That shift alone would have been laughed out of any engineer's meeting before Jack Ellis walked in. But the AI wasn't laughing. On day 26, the combat endurance gauntlet was reinstated stage 2. This time, Jack wasn't alone in the spotlight. 20 cadets stepped onto the field, including 2 new arrivals from the Oxari Dominion, known for their triple lung physiology and bioheated musculature. They stood 3 meters tall, shimmered with iridescent skin, and blinked with vertical lids that didn't close fully. Impressive, intimidating. Jack stood a head shorter than most of them. His only upgrade since last time was a new pair of shoes, Earth issue, flat soles, laced up tight. The instructor today was not Vark Thul. It was his subordinate, a sleek, angular unit called In-9, built more for diagnostics than command. It wasn't built to understand metaphor either. It simply said, begin endurance sequence. Failure is defined as cessation. The gravity shifted. 3 Gs came without warning. Most cadets stumbled but recovered quickly, systems calibrating on the fly. The Oxari didn't stumble at all. Their species had evolved on a high-pressure world where 2 suns pulled the ocean sideways. They breathed slower, moved like underwater predators. Jack bent slightly at the waist, rolling his weight forward. His body remembered. The ache in his leg flared, then receded as he settled into rhythm. His breath came sharp but even. Shock feedback drones entered next. Their algorithm had changed, less predictable, more erratic. One clipped Jack in the shoulder early on. He winced, adjusted. A second grazed his hip. His stance narrowed. Over time, he started to glide through the pulses, not because he was faster, he wasn't, but because he adapted mid-pattern, never resisting the force, only responding. 3 hours passed. The auxiliary were still upright, one of them humming in what could have been concentration or irritation. Jack was drenched again, muscles tightening, every breath monitored. But his vitals stayed inside acceptable range, barely. Then the system activated Phase 3. No announcement, just a click from overhead. The lights dimmed, and strobe fields began to pulse from floor panels, random bursts of visual disorientation, combined with rapid ambient shifts in temperature. Heat surged, then cold, then heat again. This part wasn't about strength, it was about neural fatigue, timing, disorientation. One reptilian cadet stumbled sideways and collapsed, arms flailing. A drone paused its targeting to hover above him, chirping out, "Conscious, involuntary shutdown initiated." Autopods rolled in. Jack blinked the strobe away, lowering his chin slightly to reduce exposure. He changed his breathing rhythm. 2 count, hold, exhale, reset. He didn't push harder. He time simplified asterisk. And that's when the auxiliary began to falter. Their muscles, finely tuned for heavy pressure, didn't regulate temperature well. Their internal thermostats climbed past tolerance after 40 minutes. Their lungs, though abundant, weren't optimized for heat displacement. Jack passed one of them as the auxiliary hunched low, hissing in pain. The other swiped furiously at a drone that had shocked it mid-stride. In9's voice came down, still neutral. "Warning, species threshold breached, recommend withdrawal." The auxiliary refused. Jack didn't notice, he couldn't afford to. His thigh was beginning to lock up, not cramp times lock asterisk. His quad had pulled tight in a knot, his body signaling red. The AI flashed a single message into his HUD implant standard for all cadets. Voluntary exit available. Engage to withdraw. Jack blinked once, not in response, just to clear sweat from his lashes. Then came the mistake. A drone, already listing from thermal stress, miscalculated its vector. Instead of a directed shock, it slammed into Jack's upper spine at a sharp angle. He dropped to one knee, gasping. The field stopped for 2 seconds. Everyone looked over. In9 hesitated. Protocol allowed for intervention. Jack pressed one hand into the ground, sucked in air like it was currency, and got back up. His shoulder sagged forward. His ribs were burning now, possibly a full break this time, but he was upright. The system ran silent for a moment, as if recalibrating around him again. Then, the next wave began. 14 cadets left. 8 minutes in, 2 more dropped. The field looked like a battlefield now, drone wreckage, skid marks, coolant trails, half-functional mech joints locking up. The lights flickered. Humidity climbed from machine sweat. The heat alone would have cooked standard equipment. But this wasn't about machines anymore. The human was still moving. Not fast, not strong. He was limping now, favoring his left side. One arm dangled too loosely, possibly a dislocated shoulder. But his steps kept coming in rhythm. The AI tried again. Core body temperature 39.4 Celsius. Risk of heat stroke imminent. Do you confirm continuation? Jack didn't even blink this time. And the drones began to fail. It started with jittering small course errors as the algorithms tried to target movement patterns that no longer matched predictive models. Then came the overheat beeps. Cooling fans jammed. Visual sensors blurred. One drone spun in place, then plummeted straight into the floor with a sizzle. A klaxon sounded from the control tower. Not for the cadets. For the Times equipment, asterisk. In9's voice finally cracked from its neutral tone. System-wide malfunction. Drone fleet entering emergency preservation. Shutdown imminent. Varkthul stormed into the room. "What is this?" he barked. In9 turned its head, twitching slightly. "Request denied. Equipment cannot maintain function. Operator refuses to disengage." Varkthul looked at the floor, then up at the screens. Every line was red. Except Jack's. His vitals were erratic, yes, heart rate high, dehydration climbing, but no crash, no neural shutdown, no muscular spasm that would force termination. He was time still standing asterisk. Even as the final drone flared, sparked, and died midair, Jack took one more step forward and whispered low, hoarse, nearly inaudible. "You said until we break." Varkthul's fists clenched. "You broke the machines?" Jack nodded once. He didn't grin. There was nothing victorious in his face. Just absolute fatigue, pain carved into every line of his jaw. "Guess we're done then." And only then times did he fall to one knee. He didn't collapse. He knelt, like a man finishing something. The room was dead silent. In-9 stood still. Varkthul said nothing. Medical units swarmed in. Jack didn't resist. He let them lift him, strap him down, feed lines into his neck and thigh. One medic whispered, "Sir, possible rotator cuff tear. Ribs unknown status. We need imaging." Another confirmed, "Acute dehydration. We're applying rapid rehydration protocol. Core temp at 40.1 Celsius. Cooling required." Varkthul followed the gurney out of the hall. Behind them, the lights dimmed. The Academy AI marked the event in its permanent archive. Event classification: anomalous. Training discontinued due to equipment failure. Subject did not withdraw. A new category was added to the endurance logs. Not completion. Not failure. Just unclassifiable. And the machines remained offline for the next 5 rotations. Jack didn't wake up until the second night. The Academy infirmary dimmed its lights during recovery cycles, projecting a simulated dusk to coax cadets toward rest. Jack opened his eyes to the soft glow and the sound of fluid cycling through the IV lines. His throat was raw. Every breath stabbed at his side. His left shoulder felt like it had been unscrewed and jammed back in with the elegance of a crowbar. "Vitals, stabilizing," the medical AI chirped. "Welcome back." He didn't answer right away. His tongue felt swollen from dehydration, and his mind was still catching up with the idea of being alive. A familiar pressure hugged his chest, tight bandaging. Good. He hadn't imagined the ribs breaking this time. The door hissed open. Varkthul entered quietly, for once not looming. He had something in his hand. Jack couldn't see what it was until the instructor stepped into the light. A training drone's central processor, burnt out. Its casing had split along one side. "This one tracked you for 9 hours before it failed," Varkthul said, holding it up like an artifact. Its final record was a warning. Subject unpredictable. Seek recalibration. Jack's lip cracked when he smiled, so he stopped. "Pretty fair advice." "You dislocated your shoulder during the fall," Varkthul added. 2 ribs, fully fractured, 4 bruised, quadriceps hemorrhage, internal inflammation across 7 regions. Core temperature peaked at 40.4. "Do you know what that means?" Jack closed his eyes. "It means I need to take it easy for a while." "It means you nearly died." Jack didn't flinch. "I wasn't planning to." Neither were the machines. Silence hovered between them. Then Varkthul set the charred processor on the table and folded his arms. "Why didn't you stop when your vitals hit critical?" Jack took a breath. Even that hurt, but his voice was steady. "Because I wasn't finished. That wasn't a mission, it wasn't even combat, it was a test." "Everything is a test," Jack said, his voice quiet now. "Where I come from, we push until we know what lives on the other side of the failure. Sometimes you learn something, sometimes it costs you." Varkthul's jaw flexed, not in anger, more like he was processing an unfamiliar language. "You didn't win." "I wasn't trying to win," Jack replied. "I was trying to understand what it takes to keep going." For a long time, Varkthul didn't speak. Then, with the strange hesitation of someone abandoning doctrine, he muttered, "Your training record is being sealed, not scrubbed sealed." Jack looked at him. "Why?" "Because if the others see it, they'll either fear you or try to copy you." Jack turned his gaze to the ceiling. "That a problem?" "It's irresponsible," Varkthul said. "What you did was not endurance, it was erosion. You survived not because your body was superior, but because your will ignored the limits long enough for the system to fail instead of you. That's not training. That's defiance. Jack nodded once. Still counts. Vark Thul let out a noise part sigh, part static. Your species redefines parameters by existing. You don't optimize, you improvise. Jack gave the faintest smile again. We make it up as we go. That's our whole thing. A week later, Jack was discharged under restricted movement orders. He walked out of the infirmary slowly, ribs still bound, arms still in a sling. He could stand, but only for short periods. Stares were a negotiation. Laughing was completely off the table. Still, cadets stared as he passed through the mess hall. Not mockery, not disbelief anymore, just quiet attention. The Oxari pair nodded to him. So did a few of the reptilians. One drone, still half repaired, emitted a beep as he walked by, as if in respect. At his bunk, he found a message embedded on the wall display. It was unsigned, but the language made the author obvious. We reviewed the footage 27 times. The conclusion is unchanged. Human subject exceeded mechanical endurance parameters. No known physiological augmentation. Probability model flagged the event as unsustainable. Emotional vector analysis indicates high resilience traits override systemic fatigue. This cannot be taught, only survived. Observation will continue. Jack scrolled down. Below the message was a line of academy-wide protocol revisions. Effective immediately. All endurance drills require dual threshold safety protocols, one for the equipment, one for the subject. If either reaches red line, termination is mandatory. Beneath that, a final addendum. Human protocol mode, enabled. Jack leaned back into his bunk, gingerly. He stared at the message until it blinked away, replaced by a screensaver of the galactic crest spinning slowly. Later that evening, he visited the maintenance hangar. The tech crews were still rebuilding half the drone fleet. He didn't say much, just offered a nod of apology, and left a box of Earth-made protein bars. "Thanks for saving my life," he muttered on the way out. By the next cycle, a rumor spread that one of the drones had been renamed Jack Mode, its protocols altered to ignore its own cooling limits for longer durations, modeled after the footage. 3 cadets landed in the infirmary within a week, trying to keep up with it. The nickname stuck anyway. On day 40, Jack was called to the main hall, not for punishment, not for examination, but for something else. Vark Thul stood on the high platform, flanked by the Academy's command delegates. "This is not a medal ceremony," Vark Thul said. "We don't award near-fatal decisions." Jack stood, unsure if he was about to be reprimanded or removed. Vark Thul continued, "But this institution was built to challenge the limits of combat effectiveness across the known galaxy. And today, for the first time, we recognize a new category. Resilience beyond standard metrics. Not speed, not strength, but refusal." He held up a small insignia, newly designed. Not a rank, not a unit patch. It was a simple silver circle, split down the middle. One half was a stylized gear, the other was a bare human foot. Underneath, engraved in Earth standard, "Break the limits? No, train until they do." Vark Thul handed it to him in silence. Jack took it in his good hand. No ceremony followed, no anthem played. He simply walked off the platform and returned to his bench. Later that night, a young cadet approached him. She was nervous, scaled skin, narrow limbs, optic nerves still growing into maturity. Her voice was small. "Is it true you didn't stop because no one told you to?" Jack looked up at her. "No." "Then why?" He considered the question. "I didn't stop," he said, "because there's always one more step. Even when it hurts?" "Especially then." She nodded, wide-eyed, and left. Jack leaned back, the insignia resting in his palm. He didn't need it. Not really. But it felt right. Not as a symbol of victory. As a reminder. Because Earth didn't build warriors from enhancements or cybernetic frames. It built them from stubbornness, trial, and pain. And when told to train until they broke, humans didn't argue. They simply asked, "How far?" And that, at the end of everything, was why the machines begged for rest first.